best is yet to come, and babe, won't it be fine?
You think you've seen the sun, but you ain't seen it shine.
Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Ask the Treksperts, the show where we answer your questions about Star Trek. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Sarah.
And today's episode request comes from Bat Stooge Productions, and he asked us to do a review and discussion on the Season 6 Deep Space Nine episode Waltz, which I know is one of your favorite episodes.
It is.
And it's one of mine as well from DS9. This is right up there within the pale moonlight for me for Cisco episodes. And
it's right up there at the top of good Dukat episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you've got this, you've got Wronger Than Death or Night, or Darker Than Death or Night,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, Wrong's Wronger. Yeah, I'm glad they didn't call it that.
I'm not.
You've got the, you've got some of the interplay at the end of Season 7 between him and Kai Wynn.
Yeah, Strange Bedfellows.
Yeah, Strange Bedfellows is
I
great.
love that episode.
Yeah, so all that great stuff. So, just getting right into this, let's talk a little bit about characters, because this is a character piece.
It is.
This is a stage thing. This could have been done as a play on the stage.
Yeah, it's pretty, well, for Dukat and Cisco, it's two settings.
Mm-hmm.
It's the brig on the ship, and then it's the planet the rest of the time in that cave.
Yeah, and with the exception of a very short subplot, it's a two-man play.
Yeah, which is a lot of fun, and especially since they can keep it so compelling and so interesting with just the two of them and not going anywhere.
And a completely dialogue-driven episode.
Yeah.
So what do you find so interesting and compelling about Dukat as a villain?
Well, up until this episode, I actually was always up in the air as to how much of a villain he really was.
Sure.
I mean, he's definitely a villain for the story, but is he really, could you go as far as to say, is he evil? Mm-hmm. Or is he just misguided or egotistical?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it just his ego gets in the way and so he just happens to do all these crazy things because he's a megalomaniac?
Yeah, sure.
Or is he actually evil? And so up till this point, in this episode, we find out that whatever you thought about him before, he actually is evil.
He's straight up evil, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was smart that it took this long before we finally had him come right out and admit, and I think it would have taken something like this to do that, to finally come out and admit that he hates the Bajorans and he wishes they were all dead.
Yeah. Yeah. You never get that from him before. He's always masking it with this air of benevolence where he's the good guy,
mm-hmm.
and what he was trying to do was for everybody else's best interest, but it just came off wrong, or nobody would let him do what he wanted to do, or whatever excuse he came up with.
All of the horrible things he had to do came from on high, and there was nothing that he could do about it.
Right, so between High Command and the Bajoran Resistance, he was stuck in the middle, between a rock and a hard place,
mm-hmm.
and couldn't do anything about it.
But then at the same time, I don't think that there's any bone in my body throughout Deep Space Nine, even before seeing that episode, that ever thought that he was in the right about all of that either.
No.
And this is an episode about black and white versus grays. This is an episode that comes right out the end with Cisco, and I don't think in a heavy-handed way. I like, because we're with Cisco through this, and so I like that he comes out and says this for himself. Mm-hmm. That you look at somebody like Dukat, and there's a neat contrast of how he talks to Dukat at the beginning in the brig versus how he talks to him at the end.
Yeah.
And he says, you look at a person like Dukat, and you think that people are complicated.
Yeah.
And you think that, yes, he's done some terrible things, but does that on the surface make him a bad person? Mm-hmm. And then he's able to look inside Dukat's soul.
Yeah.
And see, yes, he is a horrible person. Why? Not just because he comes out and says, I hate the Bajorans. Mm-hmm. It's because you know that everything he did was because of that. You know what the actual motivations were now. And so it really is, as the old saying goes, it is our actions that define us.
Yeah.
And then when you look into somebody's mind like that and you see that those two things really do go together, mm-hmm. yeah, he's evil.
Yeah, and it almost took that, it really did take that circumstance, and him and Cisco kind of butting heads for, I don't know if it was a couple days or it must have been a couple days, and finally getting to that point where Dukat was almost back to complete insanity and Sisko was at his wit's end, and they just laid the truth out there on the table.
This is a wonderful character piece. Like I said, it's a wonderful look at a particular kind of human condition. What I mean is, we are always trying to find the good in people. We always say that there are two sides to a person. But if there is such a thing as pure evil, would we be able to notice it? Would we be able to recognize it when we saw it? Sisko couldn't see it.
Well, not until the very end, when Dukat just went so far. He was treating him like a nicer person than I guess he deserved at the beginning.
And I don't know if it was intentional or not. Yeah, because what happened to Ziyal gives a new depth to Dukat for Sisko.
Yeah.
He sees a broken man. He says that, and he sees this man who has lost a daughter. Sisko has a son. They have that in common. They have children. Sisko can't imagine what it would have. I'm extrapolating a little bit because they don't really go into this.
Yeah.
But you could guess that Sisko can't imagine what losing his son Jake would do to him. You know, if in a similar situation, it would have made him have a break with reality, like it did Dukat, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And suddenly it puts them on more of an even playing field, and he's giving him not the benefit of the doubt necessarily.
But he
That's
thinks
a line
he's
there too.
enough.
Yeah, he thinks he's suffered enough.
Life
Exactly.
has doled out its own punishment, where maybe karma or whatever you want to call it has come around.
And it's not for him to continue to judge him.
Right. So like the episode said, he lost Ziyal, he lost his empire, and he almost lost his mind. Isn't that enough?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's not, you know, because we would have let this guy. We would have tried this guy. He probably would have lost, but he would have gone to prison, and maybe someday would have gotten out or something. So I mean, nobody can tell, because of the Federation's ideals. No one in the Federation can look at a person like that and be able to tell he is completely malevolent.
Yeah.
All of the vilification that anybody ever did to Dukat was completely validated.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't think that Dukat sees himself as evil.
No.
I don't think he gets that.
I think he's so self-centered and so egotistical that he can't allow himself to see himself as the bad guy.
Right.
No matter what he does. He thinks the universe is against him. He's in complete denial. And he's the best thing there is. And so...
And the universe revolves around him.
Yeah, so of course it must be everyone else's fault.
If people can't see it his way, that's their problem, not his.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the part where he starts going on. I like how it unravels, where it begins with, I tried to help the Bajorans. I tried to make life better for them in an impossible situation that it wasn't my idea in the first place to put the occupation on Bajor and all that sort of thing. What else was I supposed to do?
Yeah.
You know, and then that begins to unravel to where it gets to this place where he says, well, clearly we were superior to the Bajorans. All they had to do was see that and accept it, all the way to, I hate them and their stupid wrinkly noses and I want them all dead.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy the progression he goes down without very much help from Sisko.
Yeah. And it's a complete dissection of this character down to his basest place. And I think when I first saw this episode in the progression of the series, it's admittedly this episode works better when you've been watching everything up to it. And DS9 is always that way, especially with these big kind of character episodes that the show has thematically at least been building to. With, well, not just thematically, but also with these relationships, they've been building to this.
Yes.
And I think when I first saw this, I had a difficult time deciding if Dukat. I mean, I felt like the show was saying that Dukat really is evil, but there was a part of me that was like, but he's also had a psychotic break.
Yeah.
You know, there's a little bit of a part of me that says that maybe he's become oversimplified in this episode where he's had a psychotic break and he's trying to get back. And so then I think that there's a little bit of interpretation where was he more sane before Zial died? And has he come to a place of pure evil with his psychotic break? And then, with subsequent episodes, we know that he's always been this way.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
definitely.
no way around it. Once we see what he did to Kira's mother, we know he's always been like this.
Yeah.
And we know that the same man that later on is going to start a cult, is going to start a Pyraith cult.
Yes.
And impregnate a woman, and then claim that it was divine intervention, and that it was immaculate conception.
Yeah.
Well, actually not immaculate, but that she and her husband had a baby, but it was part Cardassian because it was divine intervention. We know that is the same person who brought Kira's mother to his bed.
Yeah. Yeah. He just gets super creepy, and.
Yep.
You just gotta love what they do to him. And I love the character all the way through the series, from the first time he shows up, all the way to when he's just crazy whacked out at the end. And they just do such cool things to this character.
There is nothing more twisted in all of Star Trek than Dukat.
Yeah.
Nothing. It never gets weirder than that. It never gets weirder than a guy who hates all of Bajorans putting on a Bajoran face and
Sleeping with the Kai.
Sleeping with a Kai, yeah, all of that. Whew.
Yeah.
It
He's just so
nuts.
fun to watch, and the actor is so good playing him. He's this terrible person.
Marco Lamo's great, yeah.
But you just have so much fun watching him. He has so much energy on screen all the time.
There's, of course, and I think we did a whole video on this at one point, there were always people who felt like Deep Space Nine went a little bit too far against the principles of Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry's philosophy and all of that, because it went to these sorts of places that the other shows would never have gone.
Yeah.
And I think that, as I think we both agreed in that video, I think this is one of those episodes that is a really good example of why that's not true for this show, at least in my opinion. That by comparing the Federation philosophy to something else, you're not going against it. You're just showing more dimension. You're looking at the universe at large and saying that it's not black and white. It's not simple, but then also. Sometimes things are as simple as right and wrong.
But if you think about it, if you go back to the original series,
Yeah.
there were a lot of episodes that put up Kirk with the Federation behind him versus something that was pure evil.
Absolutely.
They did a lot of black versus white
contrast,
contrast episodes. And I think Deep Space Nine, in this instance at least, is continuing that tradition, but they're doing it in more of a character-driven way because of the nature of what Deep Space Nine was, as opposed to what the original series was. And so I think it gets a little bit deeper and darker, and you're able to see into the depths of these characters' souls, and they're more three-dimensional. But I don't think it goes against what this episode goes against what Star Trek was originally founded on.
Don't you think that it's maybe exploring also a little bit of the difficulty that you have with being as idealistic as Starfleet is?
Yeah.
Not that they're wrong in attempting to perpetuate the ideals that they perpetuate. If you agree with them, you know, but the idea that again in trying to find the good in everything, you might miss something sometimes.
Oh yeah, and if you come and are raised in this perfect society that's almost an Eden on Earth, it's hard to see the evil in people, and when you come up against something that's evil, it's harder to recognize it.
Yeah. I mean, how do you fight a war against something that thinks so differently from you? And I feel like that's what the whole Dominion thing is all about. You know, it's a benevolent society being forced to fight a war and not necessarily knowing how to think like their opponents because they're ruthless and they want to take over everything and they don't think like the Federation does. does.
Yeah.
Getting back into the actual story, of the episode, because all that philosophy is really interesting. What do you think about the 3 hallucinations that Dukat has, and do you think that they are specifically representing something in his psyche?
Well, let's see. I thought it was cool that they were in there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was fun that he got to play off of Wei-Yun and Dukat.
And
Or,
Kira.
Not Dukat,
Wei-Yun
Damar
and Kira. Right.
I guess it was, him with the Dominion, his relationship with the Dominion, his relationship with Cardassia as a whole, and his relationship with the resistance movement on Bajor.
Yeah, exactly. Clearly, I think that there is some. I think that there's multiple layers there.
Mm-hmm. I
I think that it could be, and I would have to really reason this out. I would have to really think about it. Excuse me. So obviously, you're right. You have that in his professional life.
Mm-hmm.
Then, more personally, is it possible that they are the id, the ego, and the superego? Because there are 3 of them.
Yeah.
That's something that that it has in common with A Beautiful Mind. Interesting that there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
And that they might be each a different part of his psyche. You have Kira, who is constantly contradicting everything he says and mocking him.
Mm-hmm.
She seems to be maybe like the extreme conscience.
Uh-huh.
Where just everything he does is wrong because everything he does is wrong.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. At least in this episode, or especially in this episode.
And a lot of things that they're talking about, it's all things that he's reasoning out and justifying, and importantly looking to Sisko for validation, which is something that we should also talk about.
And Kiro constantly points out how much he's lying to himself.
Damar is the is I think maybe that validation.
Mm-hmm.
He's constantly agreeing with him,
mm-hmm.
and then I'm not sure exactly what part Wei-Yun is serving because he's not there very much, and so to analyze that is a little bit difficult.
He's constantly telling Dukat that he should go farther.
Yeah.
He's a wimp. He's a coward. Because he doesn't go even farther than he is going. That was the
that probably is the personification of his evil,
mm-hmm.
Which would make a lot of sense because Wei-Yun was programmed to be that way, the
mm-hmm.
real Wei-Yun.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all really interesting. I really like this idea because Sisko and Dukat as adversaries was always a brilliant relationship,
mm-hmm.
and what you have here is Dukat respecting his adversary. He has this real sincere appreciation for Sisko as an opponent because he's so challenging. He's the guy he's never been able to beat, and all he wants from Sisko is understanding. He wants that respect.
Yeah.
He argues with his with those multiple personalities throughout the whole episode about that.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the one thing Sisko's not going to give him and can't give him because Dukat himself isn't actually worthy of that respect.
Exactly.
And he can't bring himself to believe that he's not worthy of that.
And the closest he can ever get is pity.
Yeah.
And somebody like Dukat doesn't want pity.
No, because he thinks he's above that. If he's perfect, what's there to pity?
This episode was directed by Rene Auberjonois, and he loved directing this. I read about this in the Deep Space Nine compendium, and he was interviewed for that. And he talks about how much fun it was to frame and block, because remember, he's a stage guy,
mm-hmm.
and so he got to do an episode that is pretty much a stage play.
Yeah.
Between a couple of people, and he talks about how he got to look at this script and what these two characters were going through and finding really interesting ways to reflect what's going on in the script in what he's doing visually, because it's so minimalistic, and so you take these characters and you put them in places and it represents something. And so he said he has a place where he put the 3 personalities on top of a rock so they would look like birds of prey, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he did a lot of good work in this episode.
Ira Stephen Bear talks in there about how this was a big turning point for the show because there were a couple of huge things they were considering doing that they ultimately didn't do. And they decided to go in this other way instead. The big one is, originally, at the end of this episode, Dukat was supposed to have a more specific threat for Sisko. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just going to be the kind of broader we'll meet again, I'm gonna get you kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was originally, and I think for the episode this would have played better, but for the series I don't know how they would have done it. I think Bear's right.
Uh-huh.
It was going to be, I'm going to make you know what it feels like to lose a child.
Ooh.
And he was going to go after Jake Sisko.
Yeah.
And the only reason they decided not to do it was for the episode it would have played great.
Yeah.
It would have bookended it. At the beginning they're talking about Zial.
Yeah.
For the sake of this one show, it would have been just brilliant if that's how it had ended, don't you think? Mm-hmm. But how do you play it over multiple episodes? What does Sisko do when he gets back to the station? He'd have to send Jake back to Earth.
But would he even be safe there?
Yeah. And they just didn't know if that was a subplot they could sustain.
Yeah, fair enough. And especially since they probably didn't know this at the time, but they only had one more season to go. So
Well,
I don't know.
I want to think that was planned.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure. I don't think they thought they would go past a seventh season.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they knew they were going to end the Dominion War at the end of 7, but...
yeah. Although that would have been a better plot than Ezri.
It would have.
Yes,
I agree with you. And the other thing is, I always felt like Jake just didn't get anything to do much of the time.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes is The Visitor. It's a Jake Sisko episode. It's a Stuff That Never Happened episode.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really indicative of the problem I had with that character. His best episode is mostly played by a different actor, and it doesn't even happen at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The other really interesting thing about what they almost did with this is they almost made this one of those episodes where you go into somebody's head and they're living another life inside their own mind. And they were going to call it Dukat's Head.
Really?
Yeah, and it was going to be what it was. It was
that
going to
would have been
be
worth it for the episode title.
That's what I think. It was supposed to be Dukat's ideal world.
Okay.
And you would have seen him running Tarek Noor and Kira as his wife.
Whoa.
And they were also going to use that as an opportunity to tell us exactly what happened between Dukat and Zial's mother. And they never did that.
That's sad. I think maybe they
I
should
kind of
have
wish
had
they had done both.
an episode. Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, before Waltz, you have Dukat's Head, which is where he's still trying to be cured of his madness.
Exactly.
And so I think you could have had room for both episodes. I think that would have been really cool.
There was, and the last little tidbit I wanted to throw out is there were plans to continue to bring back the trio of hallucinations, and they just decided that it might be too silly to keep them around.
Yeah, I could see that. It worked really well for this episode, but I think he does such crazy things later that it may have been too much.
And I'm not sure I don't buy that they just kind of transition into something else. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of okay with me.
Yeah. Well, and I could see the stress of being on the planet and the conversations with Sisko bringing out that part of him, especially since he had just overcome completely losing his mind anyway.
Although something I loved about that I had never noticed until this viewing is that he mentions that or rather the Kira hallucination mentions that he was freaking out at the psych ward or whatever, and that he kept screaming at them. They existed before the planet. Because there's talk about, or at least that was the way I read that. It seemed like there was talk about how these hallucinations had manifested while he was still going through his madness, and clearly his madness is not over.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I think it's cool they were already there. I like that it wasn't this contrived, we landed on a planet and suddenly they show up.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool that they built that in.
No, I totally agree. Didn't quite catch that within the episode.
Like I said, I've seen this 5 or 6 times, and this was the first time I caught it, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what line you're talking about, and I just had always glossed over that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so would I. The only other thing I want to throw out real quick is the little subplot of Worf and crew trying to find them, which could have seemed like just gap filler. And what's nice about it is it's Worf in command.
Yeah.
And Worf doesn't go against Sisko's orders, even for Sisko.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I thought it was a really cool misdirect, how they keep making you think that they've picked up the distress call, they've gone to the planet, and they're gonna beam them up, and then suddenly, oh, they're at some other planet?
Yeah.
And they picked up two other survivors? Yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, we're all glad they rescued more of the crew, but let's get on to Sisko, right? But, yeah, no, I was super excited that Worf made the decision to not leave the convoy stranded out there unprotected.
Mm-hmm.
It would have made no sense for him to keep searching for Sisko and leave that convoy unprotected. And I think my best Worf moment was when he told Bashir that he could leave the bridge.
To get off the bridge, yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was great for Worf's character. That was a great Worf moment.
Isn't that kind of a neat riff on that subplot? Because over and over again in Star Trek, throughout all the series, we do this, where our important character or characters is stranded somewhere, and we'll risk the destruction of the Alpha Quadrant to go get them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then here, I mean, we do save the main character in the end, but it's right at the last minute, and the decision had already been made to turn around and do what they had to do and leave him behind if necessary.
What do you think of Dukat's decision at the end to let Sisko get rescued?
I thought that was completely in his character.
I did too.
Because he always thinks he's taking the higher road when he's really not. So he'll do something benevolent and with one hand just to prove to himself that he's the good guy, and then he'll go off and do something horrible.
I think more of it, though, is that he has something to prove to Sisko. I think it's that before Sisko dies, he needs Sisko's validation.
So he leaves the episode, he didn't get it there on that planet, but he's going to get it someday.
Mm-hmm. And remember that when we get to the very end of the series, it isn't until he thinks that he is completely proven that he is Sisko's superior by melding with the Pa race that he's finally willing to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got to watch that again. It's been a while.
It's been a while since we've been through the whole series.
That's such a fun episode.
Any big elements that you think we missed, or anything that you really disliked about the episode?
I can't think of anything. I mean, I really like this episode.
Yeah, I do too. I think it is nearly flawless.
Yeah, it's quite good. There are a couple cringe moments for me, just because Dukat's so evil and the episode has to prove it.
Yeah.
But the rest of it's so fun it makes up for it.
Let's rate it.
Okay. 4.
Yes, and I too give it a full marks, 4 out of 4.
Yeah.
Everybody, thanks as always for watching Ask the Treksperts. Really hope you enjoyed it, and wow, this got me in a DS9 mood.
It did.
How much do I want to go back and watch some DS9? Between
or
this...
just Dukat.
Between this and Impact Noir
Yeah.
from a couple episodes ago on the show, I really want to watch some DS9 now.
You gotta love Cardassians.
So if you have something you'd like us to talk about on Ask the Treksperts, if you have a topic you'd like to suggest that relates to Star Trek, or an episode you'd like us to review, leave your requests in the comments, and we will hopefully see you in a couple of weeks. We've been really busy, so it's been a while since we put one of these up, but we're going to try to get back to our 2-week schedule if we can, and I don't know what we'll do next time. I don't know if it'll be an episode review or if it'll be something else. People are really wanting us to do a Dominion War episode, and I think we want to do that,
yes.
But we've got to get back through the show again before we do that. At least go back and rewatch 6 and 7, if nothing else.
Yeah, because I remember a lot of it, but I'm sure if we did one right away, I'd miss some stuff.
So it's gonna be a while before we get to that because we just need to refresh ourselves on that stuff. So anyway, might be some more episode reviews just in the interim. Also, eventually we want to get back to our season overviews of TNG and beyond. And we just haven't had the time to watch a lot of Star Trek lately, so we're gonna try to get back into it. And until then, like I said, leave your requests in the comments, and we will definitely consider them. And we'll give you something in 2 weeks. Thanks again for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Sarah.
See you later.
The best is yet to come.